crack on. So yeah, so you can all leave if you don't want to be recorded. So yeah, this is less about Active Essex. It is definitely not about me. This is about you guys meeting, finding ways of connecting with each other offline, and as I say, getting stuff done. So what would be really helpful for us all, I think, is, and I'll maybe come to the Active Essex crew at the end, is just I'll just introduce you or say hello, and if you just tell us a bit about yourself and your role, and I guess the particular reason, hopefully, why you're here. Whether that's because you're in a direct people-facing role, or whether that's because you can help shape, influence, and disrupt the system that we're talking about. Does that sound okay? Paula, I'll come to you first if that's okay, because you're nearest to me on my screen.
No, I thought I was the most disruptive. That's why you were calling on me first, Steve. Right, so many of you will already know me. I'm Paula Hornitz, and I'm the Chief Operating Officer at the Essex Provider Network. This is a network of providers, both from the independent training provider sector, FE, HE, and adult community learning. So I've got a wide sort of church of members. Obviously, the Active Essex focus is extremely relevant to our members, both in fact of sort of just being sort of residents of Essex, and certainly I've advertised in this week's newsletter the Find Your Active campaign, so hopefully we'll get people sort of on board and excited about that. But more sort of specifically, many of our members actually deliver sort of sports focused training, and one of the issues that is quite sort of relevant at the moment is that there doesn't seem to be any lack of appetite from sort of prospective people coming into the industry. The difficulty is the gap between sort of wanting to go into the industry and then maybe achieving an apprenticeship. Now, obviously, there is some light at the end of the tunnel in terms of the SFA 16 to 19 procurement exercise that was announced yesterday in terms of traineeships, which may well help some of our members, and certainly what I'd like to get from sort of the collaborative sort of group in here are sort of support in terms of getting sort of members linked up with each other. So those that can't apply are able to subcontract. So that's me.
Brilliant. Thank you, Paula. You're very welcome. And as you kind of just alluded to at the end there, the traineeship piece, is just one great example where if we've got a bit of a heads up that that's coming, let's have a conversation here about how we approach that. And ultimately, Paula's membership is there increasingly to serve our needs. So Paula can then go back into that group and say, this is what this collective forward-thinking group of employers across the county want. Let's get on and deliver against it. So Paula, thank you very much. You're very welcome. Carl, great to see you. Just introduce yourself and a bit about your people and workforce interactions.
Okay, my name is Carl Hayes. I'm the Managing Director of Impulse Leisure. We run the local authorities facilities based in Thurrock. We also have a golf course, entertainment venue, and we have our own budget club as well, based in Wickford. We've got an employment force of around about 120 at the moment, come back following COVID. We probably need another 15 to 20 at least. Our biggest challenge at the moment is getting qualified leisure staff. The people that we're attracting are coming from outside the industry, have no leisure sort of skills or background, and we're having to push them through apprenticeships and upskilling them from the start. We also don't get anything from universities or colleges, and most of them that are on sports degrees and things like that, in our view, still aren't getting the basic skills to be work ready, even whilst they're learning, let alone when they're coming out of the course. So that's kind of our experience, and my involvement on this is to kind of understand that gap and what we can do to try and help that, really. Thank you.
Carl, thank you very much. As I said, you're very welcome, and yeah, conscious of some of the work that you guys are already doing, but yeah, that workforce need articulated in those couple of sentences is the kind of stuff that we need to be bringing here and trying to help you resolve as a collective. So thank you for joining us. Catherine, can I come to you next, please?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Catherine Kerr. I work at the University of Essex, been there 2.5 years. And I do teaching and research. My area is obesity and diabetes, and a nutritionist and physical activity specialist. But why I'm here today is I've got a sort of new role in employability across the School of Sport Rehabilitation and Exercise Science. And I see this as a two-way process. So what Carl was saying is just perfect. I want to know more about what our students need in terms of skills to be employable, and indeed across the sector, because we have sport and exercise science, physiotherapy and sports therapy, and sports performance and coaching. So across a lot of the roles that I think we're going to discuss. I also run a second year business as enterprise module. So again, I want to make sure it's really filling our students up for employment and the skills that are needed. So that's me for now, really.
Super, thank you, Catherine. Really important, both the last point I guess you've reinforced there, but you're a constituent member of Essex as a university. You're sat on a wealth of knowledge and expertise around learning and development and education. I don't think we're maximising that in this kind of employer-facing space. So brilliant that you're in that new role, and yeah, we look forward to you contributing and bringing the value from the HE space. Kieran, can I come to you next?
Hi, my name is Kieran Charles. I'm the Head of Sport and Leisure for Tendring District Council. So I think from our point of view, to give you a bit of a snapshot, we've got about 190 employees in the sport centres, sport and leisure centres across the board. I think in terms of a skills gap at this moment in time, it seems to be a lot of the NGBs and coaches and training and qualifications that seem to be quite hard to get hold of. Someone in these neck of the woods that have access, I suppose, to them types of qualifications to be able to provide activities, not just to adults, but also for juniors, and increase in participation across the juniors as well, which is very, very awkward and very, very hard from our point of view. I've got a bit of a passion for learning and development. I originated from a company called Greenwich Leisure Limited, started off there as an admin officer, worked my way up to general manager, and now obviously into head of sport and leisure. So I've done that career path and that journey myself. So I've got a bit of a passion there for people to take ownership for that and to drive that forward from that perspective. And then I think the other part that I'm quite keen to get involved in to a certain degree is around school exit plans, in terms of your people or your children that are going from secondary school into college and looking for a part-time job and that sort of stuff, to look at funding arrangements and seeing how we can support them, whether or not that's an hour of activity a week, couple of hours, or whatever the case may be, so it can fit around their schedules as well, because I think that's a massive part that we kind of fall down on as well.
Super, thank you. I think what we are all really hoping, and I don't want this to always be a conversation either, is the storytelling you've just there. Like, we will have all knotted our way across the sector incoherently at times, in random directions at times, because the career IAE space is not good enough in sport and physical activity. So I look forward to breaking bread on some of those things, because I'm sure we've all perhaps been sat poolside as a lifeguard many moons ago, and our time on the turf in terms of coaching and giving people a good experience of physical activity. So you're very welcome, Kieran. Talking of football, Brendan, can I come to you, sir?
Thanks, Steve. Yep. Hello, everyone. Just to introduce myself, I'm Brendan Walsh. I'm Chief Exec for Essex County Football Association. So we're the national governing body for football across Essex, and we extend into some London boroughs as well. We employ a workforce of circa 50 employees. There are 25 that are full-time that work across Essex County FA, and then we have sessional coaches and tutors that work on behalf of Essex County FA, delivering across the county. There are circa 4,700 teams, 1,100 clubs that play football across Essex. So we are one of the largest providers of football, if you like, across the county in terms of participation. a key area for us is we work across the breadth of football. So we work with the professional clubs and their community arms, who equally employ a huge number of people, delivering programs into schools, education programs, activity programs, participation programs, all the way through to the voluntary sector and the grassroots level in terms of clubs that provide activity in local communities. A key focus there is around how we are looking at developing a workforce that can deliver high quality programs and provide training opportunities and the development pathway to progress through into paid employment at various levels across the game. Apprenticeship programs are key to that. Football more and more is being used as a tool to engage people into activity programs, particularly further education programs, with the allure of some qualifications, but they don't necessarily always meet the end high quality level in terms of the employment. So a key focus for us is really about some of that quality that's being produced, I think, across the sector, and how we can make sure that people coming through those programs are kind of sector ready, football ready to come in and engage, whether that be as a coach, whether that be as an official, whether that be in a part-time role leading into full-time opportunity. And the further bit just from me that there is a big focus there is with that level of grassroots clubs, we have a huge volunteer workforce that tap into ongoing CPD work. That is significant across coaching, officiating, and more in other areas, safeguarding, well-being as well, and the role that will play in terms of supporting local communities.
And thank you very much. Hugely insightful. And as you say, it would be remiss of us not to at least invite you to the table. So delighted that you're taking the time out to make this commitment to us, and I hope to build some of those actions to help you, use the nation's favourite sport, and the sport that's probably the most delivered and participating across the county, to deliver more impact. So thank you very much for taking the time and joining us. Last but not least, Mr. for those of you that are unaware, For Confidence is a business that I'm an executive chairman of, so I set the business up with Lindsay. So I don't plan that this is a conflict, but just that Sport for Confidence is a business that I'm also directly involved with. But Jake's obviously here because as a business we're growing. We've got all sorts of people and workforce-related ideas, as well as all sorts of people and workforce-related challenges. So Jake, welcome. Thank you for taking the time, and over to you.
That's all right. Thanks, Mitch. Nice to meet those that I haven't met before. My name's Jake Turner. I'm the Operations Director of Sport for Confidence. And I suppose our primary vision is to tackle inequalities that exist within society. And we do that through utilising sport and physical activity as a preventative measure, in particular using the occupational therapy profession, partnering that up with coaches to make reasonable adjustments and to break down any barriers so that disabled people and or anyone can take part in sport and physical activity. On a local level, we're operating in around sort of 6 to 7 leisure centres within Essex, and then we've got a few delivery models sort of in London and towards Southend. Why am I here? I suppose we've got a staff team of around 24, 25 individuals that work day in, day out with a range of individuals that require lots of experience, skills, knowledge, empathy, sympathy to be able to support those individuals to take part in sport and physical activity. And I suppose with the increase in inactivity levels as a consequence of COVID, I'm excited to be part of a process that can make sure the workforce are well equipped to be able to support disabled people to engage. That's me.
Brilliant. Thanks, Jake, and yeah, appreciate you taking the time out of the diary as well to join us. So I think as we've alluded to at the beginning, there's a few people missing, which hopefully will add real value to this group as we move forward. But ultimately, one of the things that I guess I am advocating for Simon, Holly, and Ray to really develop their own, I guess, awareness and engagement in this space is that I'd love for them to become people developers in their own right that are working within an organisation like Active Essex that in the people and workforce center. That's not to say at all that they don't now, but I guess all three of them have come from probably a traditional sports development, sports coaching background. I'm going to put Jason on the spot briefly in a second because I think it's important just to land this, Jason, if that's okay, because the recognition of Active Essex's role in the people workforce agenda, but also given everything else that's going on, system change, system partners, experiences from local delivery pilot, of course, people in workforce are important, but actually maybe just to land this in, I guess, the bigger ambitions and the way that Active Essex has evolved over the last few years to really fuel this work and to connect it back to the other work that you guys are involved with and leading across the county. So maybe just a bit of a kind of 2-minute thought leadership piece for you, if that's okay, that you weren't expecting to do.
Indeed, and good afternoon, Steve. And just thank you for that, Steve. And just to echo, firstly, why am I here? I'm here because I care. I care about this agenda. It's extremely important. I've got a talented team of people here today, Rachel, Simon and Holly, but I wanted to join this first meeting to show my full endorsement that actually people development and the skill agenda is so important to us here at Active Essex. As Steve alluded to, back in the summer this year, we launched for the first time a system strategy that absolutely has got system partners behind and galvanised to try and create a fit for the future approach here in the county of Essex. And that's never been done before. And that's been done this time because there is a real swelling of support that recognises the role that physical activity and sport can play in a multitude of different system settings. And that's quite a eureka moment. But what's also quite important attached to that is the importance of having a highly skilled and diverse workforce. Because if we haven't got that in place and we're not equipped to do that, then actually that all falls apart in the work and the aspirations that we have here in Essex. So this piece of work and piece of work that the colleagues in my team have been leading on is so important and underpins every part of success that we're trying to achieve here with partners around the table. And of course, importantly, for the residents of the people of the county of Essex. We identified 6 particular foundations for success in the Fit for the Future system strategy, and probably 2 really, 3 in fact, but 2 particularly land quite well this afternoon. One of them clearly is about people development and the need and the importance. We recognise that if we're going to be successful, we have to commit to the development of people and skills and the relevant right skills and the right jobs across the sector. So that's really important, and we recognise that. The other important thing, which is the exciting thing, is not to underestimate the contribution that we make to the economic growth of the county of Essex. So the fact that we're creating jobs, the fact that Kieran's getting people coming through and Carl getting people come through your doors and they're spending money, that is contributing to the GVA of the county. And so we mustn't underestimate actually the huge contribution that our sector makes to the county. And so it's particularly those 2 particular key points that we are absolutely having those system conversations. And it's great to see a myriad of people here this afternoon to really help support us as a system approach to really land this important agenda, because I think we're just scratching the surface at the moment, quite frankly. And I think that there's a huge aspiration on our side that we want to do so much more. And I know that the agenda this afternoon shapes that to start to go into a bit more detail around the skills piece of work that we've done. But as Steve said earlier on, I just don't want us to be talking about it and meeting every so often. I actually want to start to see, I want to see with you collectively how we can make a real difference to creating those important skills here across the county. Thanks, Steve.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jason. So, guys, I'm going to come to you because you're all here as well. You've all got an important role in the workforce itself. So one of the things that I guess was useful from Kieran's little piece was a bit of that storytelling about a career journey. So, Holly, do you want to go first and tell us a bit about, because I don't know this actually, where you've been, what you've been doing, where those roles started and what's lit your fire around this agenda?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. Yeah, so I'm Holly Wood. I realise my name's Active Essex on here. And I'm the Assistant Relationship Manager for Mid Essex, making up that mid team with Simon. But Simon and I have been leading the kind of workforce skills agenda within Active Essex. And now we've got Rachel on board as well to look at that wider sport and physical activity priority within our new strategy. In terms of my backstories, probably similar as everyone else's, has kind of gone all around the houses and started off in that leisure, lifeguard, swim instructor, duty manager role, and then suddenly was like, oh, I want to go to uni, and didn't actually do sport and physical activity at university. I then went on a tangent and went within the arts and culture sector, came out and did some stuff around there, wanted to be an agent, some arts management, and then came back in to the sport and physical activity sector with another active partnership of Active Suffolk. They are now, and started off as their admin support assistant, and then kind of got the bug again massively and realised that actually I was in the wrong area of sport and physical activity, and needed to join in this kind of area. And people in particular has always been really important to me, not just from this role. I was given the workforce opportunity, but actually people development generally is really important to me, and I think it's absolutely key for us to tackle anything, not just within sport and physical activity. I think investing in people is so important.
Brilliant, thank you, Holly. Just said plenty of shared experiences. I see Kieran smiling away, thinking about, you still got your yellow t-shirt with lifeguard on the back, I hope, somewhere. Rach, if you can come up for breath for just a minute, tell us a bit about your little career journey, because that's a bit of an eclectic one, isn't it?
Yeah, I suppose I'm one of the dinosaurs now, which remember sport for sport's sake. And my mantle, obviously from a work perspective, it's a case of the power to change lives, and that was me. From a sports perspective, it took me across the world, and I had a fantastic professional sports career. Now it's a case of actually recognizing that without those people who were able to support me along my journey, and how they were able to influence and inspire those people who come into your everyday lives, and I suppose whether they be from a sports for confidence perspective, the people who are really hard to achieve and get, and Kieran, from your perspective, the kind of communities that are in and around you, those first contacts that you have to be able to change those people's perspectives are second to none. And from our perspective, with being Active Essex, those people developers, you're right, people focused, people driven, the momentum that's going right now, we need to continue that. But without your valuable input, I think we will be missing an opportunity. So yes, I had a fantastic career, but without those people who were able to support me and guide me, which is where we are now around the table, that wouldn't have been possible. And I'm not saying that we're here to necessarily grow talent or present professional sportsmen and women from Essex, but we have got that ability to change lives and change those first impressions and actually change the course. So that's where I'm excited to be involved in this.
Athletes are people too, right?
Absolutely.
Cool. So Simon, last but not least, I'll come to you, because obviously I think everyone probably knows a bit more about you because you've been doing that kind of merry-go-round to say hello to people. But yeah, just want to introduce yourself and a bit of your career story, because it's another interesting one.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Yeah, so I've obviously met everyone around the table a few times, so I won't go too much into that bit. For those of you, I guess, and actually I'm thinking back now, Steve, Jason, when we were in Essex Cricket Ground launching the skills strategy in 2018, I think it was. I believe I remember going through this exact thing of this was my journey. So I started out, I did sports science at college, at the same time as working part-time as a coach. From there, I then started working full-time as a coach and wanted to sort of understand where I was going to go next. I didn't really have a clue. I fell into local authority sports development type role, did some coach mentoring, a little bit of support and guidance to some other coaches. I then got a role as coach development manager within Suffolk Sport or Active Suffolk now, and then came over to Active Essex as an assistant relationship manager in 2017, I think it was, and then moved into a relationship manager role that I am in today.
Brilliant, thank you, Simon. So listen, I wanted to take a bit of extra time to do that because I come back to the points I tried to make earlier on. Like, if we're going to succeed as a team, we need to know each other and get to know each other and enjoy the journey that we're going to go on together. So I think that's important. We've got a bit both of lived experience, but also I think across the group, supplemented by the people that aren't here at the moment, we've got a real kind of mix of fire starters ready to go and have some fun. And we can really prod and poke and shape and influence the sector, both from a national perspective, whether it's the stuff that I'm kind of involved with our professional institute or with Sport England, whether it's the provider network, whether it's you guys that are representing cohorts of people, of coaches, of immediate challenges. I think we can have a lot of fun with this, and I think we can really get some stuff done and really move this agenda forward, and hopefully look back in 6 to 12 months' time and think, I remember when we started on that journey, but now like there's a better relationship with the university. We've got some money in for traineeships. We're doing some really groundbreaking work around work-based mentoring and supervision. Some stuff's come out of the university around business skills. So the art of the possible, I guess, is where we're looking today. One of the things that we just wanted to do, I guess, in terms of due diligence and making sure that everything is in line, is that we shared with you a set of terms of reference. And I think we don't want to obviously spend I don't want to spend too long talking about this particular item, but I think it's important that we understand that this does fall in line with the broader kind of governance structure within Active Essex, and making sure almost that it's not just this kind of floating group and floating panel. And one of the things clearly is to really land this in the system to which Jason's referring to. And we'll all go back to our day jobs on the back of this call, and we'll all go back into things tomorrow and next week. But ultimately, we're all going to be in other people and workforce-related conversations. And the idea being, I guess, that we use these terms of reference to bring us back in every time, to make sure that they are consistent, and that's what we believe we're signing up to. And of course, the ambitions, the measurement, the KPIs that might come with it, let's not worry about that too much to start with. Simon's going to present to us in a minute a load of insight and data and important stuff so that we've got a bit of strategic direction and we're starting from the right point. But the terms of reference are there because I think it's important from a governance perspective that we really land this as something that's just more than a group of people coming together. So you've had them all for a week or so. I think Simon may have even shared them in advance. I guess, first killer question for me, is there anything in there that anybody is vehemently opposed to? Or is there anything in there that people think is missing or think is something that needs to change or tweak before they're comfortable to get these approved? Silence is hopefully a good thing. In which case, let's see those as the terms of reference that this group adopts. The one thing that we just need to consider, I guess, as we move forward is, I guess, the frequency of how we're going to bring people together. And I think, like the start of any team, now up until Christmas, we'll probably be maybe seeing a bit more of each other than we'll do when we get into a bit more of a regular cycle to get some stuff up and running and moving. The key bit that I'd ask Simon to pull out is that all good teams have a kind of shared intent, a shared purpose, and I'm sure within your organisations you have some kind of team code or set of values that hopefully you all live and breathe. It's a component part of good people development and good organisational development. So the terms of reference are something that I've asked Simon will be on the top of every agenda, just to make sure that when we're coming in, we just remind ourselves of why we're here and the values to which we want to bring to this group. So again, they're not offensive, hopefully, but ultimately we want them to be things that you associate with it being a productive use of your time, and ultimately something that begins to deliver positive outcomes and intent. So again, anything on the values of the group that anybody would like to pick up and challenge at all?
No, they're all good for me, thank you.
Great. So we've either done lots of good listening so far, Simon, or I've already lost people. I hope it's not the latter.
One bit, Steve, that I was just sort of wanting to float by and raise with people. I think for me that the top two, so the equality and collaborative pieces are really important. As we move down, we've then got enterprising, high performing and partner focused. Now, I guess just a question really to the group to get people's thoughts. Now, obviously we've mentioned collaborative, partner focus. Are they similar? Do we want to take two fairly similar values forward? We don't have to have 5 values. So it's just sort of a couple of questions to ask really. Again, high performing, and does that sit alongside us as a panel, or would there be a better value to sort of describe how we want to work and how we go forward as a collective? Just a sort of a couple of questions, I guess, I wanted to put out there.
Value kind of inclusivity or inclusive, relevant one, perhaps, rather than two that are similar. Just a thought, rather than silence. I mean, just
happy to have a look at that as well, Catherine. Yeah.
Just in terms of the work that's being done, and you know, when the skills are put to use, and in terms of communities and that it's kind of inclusive. But that maybe is a bit like equality, I suppose. Actually.
Yeah, one I would consider would be respect. Obviously, we might not all agree moving forwards, but we've got to respect the fact that other people may have a different opinion or may have a different viewpoint on something, and it's about not making that personal, really, I suppose.
That's helpful, Carl. Paula, you've got your hand up as well.
Yeah, I was actually just going to follow on from Catherine's point, really, and it's quite apt considering this is Inclusivity Week this week. I think, you know, a high proportion of our activities should be focused towards, as one of the guys mentioned earlier, in terms of disability inclusion. So it's a very important statement to make, and one that we should really sort of work towards.
I know it won't be lost on any of you, and I certainly know it won't be lost on Brendan and Jason, but I guess I talk a lot in the work that I do around reading the tea leaves. And I think if you read the tea leaves from Sport England, if you read the tea leaves from the FA, from the big organisations nationally, that yes, we would be remiss if we're not really addressing some of those key inclusion related pieces in particular, because we recognise, and I think the local delivery pilot has flushed a lot of this out, the workforce that we maybe have right now in Essex, is it as societally reflective as we would like it to be? So I guess if we're going to do something about that, then absolutely it should sit front and centre in the values of how we operate. So Simon, perhaps if we just have a consideration about how we take those two pieces offline, but yeah, absolutely from a, and I don't want to drop Nolan principles and some of that kind of stuff in here, but yes, I guess it's my role, Carl, to try and police the respect side of things, and of course there's going to be differing views on where we perhaps direct the team to be spending their time and resources, but yeah, I will certainly police that, but happy that we perhaps try and weave that into some of the language in there as well. If there isn't anything else, I guess we take those as a bit of a written then. The only question I guess for me is, Jason, just in terms of timeliness, it feels to me that it makes sense that this group does have a line of sight into the board. Now, I don't know whether you've necessarily, of course, you've got people that are people champions on that board, maybe one that isn't as disruptive as I have been over the last few years, but yeah, I guess it'd be useful maybe just to make sure that we are either reporting in or seen to be part of that broader ecosystem that the Active Essex community are. As you said, you've got your pincers out and you've started to influence around the system, but I'd want to make sure that the Active Essex board are aware of the progressive nature of the work that we're going to be doing. So I guess maybe it's just a simple question as if to say, is there somebody there that you're going to get to kind of champion this, and can we make sure that we've got a routine or at least a standing item on board agendas that Simon is just producing a brief paper to make sure that the board are kept abreast of what's going on?
absolutely agree, and I'm going to let them answer that themselves because they should be able to answer that one. It's a good test here. Simon and Rachel, over to you. Let's see who said a name that you should say.
Yeah, so Rach and I have well, initially started to make contact with Emma, who's on our board, to discuss this work and just to check with her that she feels that she's got the skill set, the knowledge, expertise, interest to take that forward. So we've got that underway and we're having a discussion with Emma next week. So we will be able to feedback from that.
Just in case anyone is not aware, it's Emma Lewis. So Emma Lewis works for the Aquatic Centre in Essex, not Essex, London for GLL. So Kieran, back to your roots. So yeah, she's very tapped, understands, and has a passion as a key board member to get involved. So I can't imagine she won't take the mantle.
If she comes to me for counsel, then I shall make sure that she has to take this on, having come initially about the board role. So I'll ping her a WhatsApp to say, delighted to hear you're taking on the people portfolio on the Active Essex board.
Let's give her 2 minutes to accept it first.
Cracking. Super. Okay, I guess that's the kind of the 45 minutes, kind of some of the more governance related stuff out of the way and building a bit of that report. You're all aware, because Simon has been out virtually and or face-to-face and either seen you all or shared with you where things are going, but just a little bit of context again from me. The tea leaves that I spoke about earlier on, some of the work I'm involved with at Sport England, the specific piece that I've just taken on around rewriting their coaching plan, I guess gives me a bit of privy access to what's been happening in there and over the last few years. And ultimately, 4 years ago, Sport England used to invest around £4 or £5 million a year in workforce-related partners, some that would come to the likes of Active Essex, some that would go to UK coaching, a small bit to the Activity Alliance, and a small bit to our professional body, our chartered institute, SIMSPA. Wheel forward 4 years, and the envelope that Stuart Armstrong and his team are overseeing is closer to 50 million than it was for, with at least 40 different partners now that they're investing in, that are the people aforementioned, but also include brands and organisations like Boeing, like Our Parks, like the Open University, Magic Academy are just doing some interesting work around communities of practice. But I think, again, if we follow that line of sight, having insight-led awareness of great people doing people developing people-related things, I think that investment's going to grow. And I think that investment gives us an opportunity to say, Active Essex's hand is up to lead the way here. And I'm delighted that the work that Simon and colleagues have done to kind of unpick some of the data, the insight, and get hold, I guess, of the key documentation that exists around this. Because, yes, of course, developing good people is a nice thing to talk about. But as Paula, more than anybody will know, and as some of you know, the moment you go into the skills world, it's a different language. But there is so much skills-related stuff already going on in Essex, insight, policy, interventions, digital skills, public money, that actually, I guess what Simon has hopefully had a bit of a deep dive in with Holly is we've got some better insight now. We've started the conversations with the LEP. Clearly the county council have an interest. Here come the provider network. So just beginning to, I guess, assimilate and understand everything that's out there and available to us. And if you look at that strategic intent from Uniting the Movement, and you look at the strategic intent that's coming around making sport and physical activity more inclusive, safer, big issue here, that those of you that saw that documentary last Monday, punchy, athletes talking about coaches that abuse them, like that makes us all hopefully feel a bit uncomfortable. But ultimately, the direction of travel around people, it's never been a better time. And absolutely, the work that the team have done already kind of means that we are front and centre, but actually it's what happens next. And Jason and the team have just been going through their application for Sporting and investment moving forward. But actually, that's just about the operation of Active Essex. I think what we can begin to do, and what Simon's going to talk us through now, is we've now got some great detail from employers about what their skills needs are. We've got some great providers and organisations lined up ready to help solve that. There is funding and finance and resource to get in the middle there. we've got disruption and enterprise and innovation sprinkled around. And I guess the joy of what's going to come next is how we can really begin to knit that together to ultimately, as I said, take action. But Simon, I'm going to hand to you now. And as I said, people are, I guess, abreast of this because you've given them decent briefings and you've shared the documentation. But yeah, it'd be great just to unpick, I guess, where you think we're sat right now before we start to make some decisions about key areas to address moving forward.
Thanks, Steve. So I'm just going to try to share my screen. So I've pulled just a bit of a presentation together and to give some highlights of some of the data and bits that we've collected as it stands. So I guess I don't want to go into too much detail because I know Steve and Jason's touched on, obviously Active Essex launched the Fit for the Future strategy, which was for the wider sector, physical activity and sports strategy. Jason's mentioned under the Foundations for Success, people development is in there, as is economic growth and development. And the reason that myself, Holly and Rach are around this piece of work is because we are taking the lead on the sport and physical activity priority within that strategy, where all of the skills work and the workforce piece of work is going to sit. So obviously today, firstly, another thank you for you guys for giving up your time to be part of the Sport and Physical Activity Skills Advisory Panel. As Steve has mentioned, there's a few people that aren't here today, but hopefully in the not too distant future, they will be able to come and join us. What I've tried to do is just pull out some of the stats and bits just to highlight a bit of a positional piece of where we are. And then we can start to explore the next steps and where we're going from here. So using the MC data pack that was shared with everybody, I've looked to pull out a bit of information and just wanted to highlight that really. So through the work with SIMSPA and the skills pilot that we've been part of, MC, which is an economic modelling specialist organisation that use employment data and economic analysis, and they make that available via web tools. So we have got a license to that currently, and so we're able to pull off pretty much live data as it's available around employment, etc. On this bottom graph, you can see from 2015 to 2020, the number of jobs within the industry. Now, in 2017, it reached a high at just over 20,850. And then you'll notice 2018, it dropped back down before starting to gradually increase prior to the pandemic. And then we've had a bit of a fall down to 2020. On the next chart, and this one's quite difficult to see, but this looks at occupational growth. So this is pulling out SOC code information for those people that have got jobs within or under the leisure and sport managers title, sport players, sport coaches and instructors, fitness instructors, and sport and leisure assistants. So from this chart, we can see that Chelmsford has got the highest number of people employed within those occupations. And you can see down at the bottom, there was just a slight change between Malden and Castle Point. Again, if you look at these, actually, it won't be far off the general population size. If we were to order all of these local authority places by population, actually this won't be far off, with Colchester, I think, if I'm right, being the largest area of Essex. So give or take a few, this isn't far off what we would expect to see percentage wise of population. This next chart then looks to go into industry growth. So this is using the SIC codes. So any jobs that come under sports and recreation education, operations of sport facilities, activities of sports clubs and fitness facilities. So this is for those industry-based jobs. And you'll notice here, Colchester is way above at the top, and Chelmsford has dropped back down. Now, 8 of the local authorities, so Epping, Chelmsford, Basildon, Braintree, Thurrock, Uttlesford, Malden and Brentwood have all seen growth from 2015 to 2017. And then there's a bit of a drop off to 2018. Now, I'm going to come on to another slide in a second, but the only 2 local authority areas, Southend and Tendring, are the only 2 that have seen a gradual decrease. Every other local authority area has seen an increase to some degree. Now, if we compare active lives data, interestingly, between the period of May 17 to November 17, there's also a drop off in number of active people. Now, we couldn't say that is definitely a correlation between less people being employed in the sector and less people being active, but what a piece of work that we will look to do is just to pull off, particularly around those 8 local authorities where there was a decrease between 2017 and 18, to look at their local authority active lives data and see if that matches. So that's something that we will just take away, and it would be interesting to see if there is any way that we could start to articulate actually number of people working in the sector does have a positive impact on the number of people being active in the area. So that was just something interesting that I wanted to highlight. Now, sports coaches, instructors and officials, I don't think it's a surprise, are consistently the highest number of employed job types across Essex. And you'll see that the sports and leisure assistants and leisure and sports managers switches over a couple of times. Now, interestingly, in the 2015 to 16 period, there's an increase of number of leisure assistants employed in the sector, and it all of a sudden shot up by over 400 in that period, which is why it jumped up, and then obviously it has gradually dropped back down. So that was just a couple of the bits I wanted to pull out around the EMSI data, which is national data or local data that is pulled together and widely available. And we've got, as I say, access to that. Moving on to the sector consultation. Now, back, was it July, I think we carried out the consultation, I can't remember now. We had 59 organisations and 49 self-employed individuals complete that consultation. That covered on behalf of 2,266 people. So that was really our sample size and what we're hopefully going to base the data for the strategy off of. Within that, there were a number of roles ranging from gym instructor to health navigator. And in total, there were 22 different roles highlighted in that consultation. The table at the bottom you can see is the organisations that completed it. So we had 4 organisations that employ more than 400 people take part, and that went all the way down to 29 organisations who have less than 20 people. So, and that's tending to what we know, majority of the sector is SME, and so would be on that smaller side of it, employment numbers. And then on the right hand side of that table, you can see the type of organisations, whether they were local authority, not-for-profit, private, trust, social enterprise or charities. Now, just the last bit I wanted to just highlight. So from those 22 different roles, the common types of training needs that were highlighted from a delivery type role was around mental health training, long-term health conditions, impact of COVID and safeguarding. And with the more management focused roles was around service improvement, people development, equality and diversity, and risk awareness or management. Now, interestingly, and conversation Holly, Rach, myself were having earlier is around actually most of that training is pretty readily available. And so it's got us starting to think about, well, if the training is available, what are the barriers for people to access it? And I think that's some of the conversation we want to start picking up with the group and try to understand and move forward. So I'll stop sharing my screen. But I guess you've seen the data, you've got the data packs, so you can feel free to look at those and go through those as much as you like. But for me, there's some questions there around if the training that's been highlighted is available, why is it not being accessed? Is it too costly? Is it not the right type of training? There's a whole raft of potential options. And then moving into the next piece that I know Mitch is going to take us through is around the next steps leading into the strategy and what do we want to be looking at considering to make sure we're focusing on as a group, as a sector for our strategy work going forward. Mitch, back to you.
Super, thanks, Simon. So yeah, I guess any initial questions for Simon on anything that you've just heard there? And I guess come back to the kind of in its most simplistic sense, set of skills requirements. We know that, like I know Paula and I'm sure even Catherine saying, well, that stuff's out there, it's available, it's good to go. But yeah, any initial thoughts from that? Catherine, come to you first. I think your hand up just.
I wasn't first
Paula.
actually, but Paul was first.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
right, you go. You've come off mute now.
Okay. Yeah, because this might feed into a strategy. I just wondered when you've got numbers of jobs in the different areas, whether that relates or was accounted for by the size of the population in those areas. I don't know Essex very well, but so is that relevant to? Yeah,
so again, I think particularly the ones that we've seen earlier, as I said, Colchester, Chelmsford, Basildon, tendering potentially are some of the larger areas, and so we would expect probably to see a greater percentage then of workforce in those areas. I think for me, there's an element of if we reflect back on the wider work that we're wanting to do around engaging inactive people and trying to understand the needs of those people and what motivates those people, actually to see the likes of Basildon tendering to be lower down those lists when arguably there's a good rationale to say, actually, if they're the areas we really need to target, we probably need to build a bigger workforce in those areas. Or is it a case of actually we just need to retrain, redevelop and deploy more effectively in those areas, I guess is some of the questions.
Thanks.
Paula, you've taken your hand down. I hope that's not because I got the order wrong.
No, not at all. And actually, it follows on very nicely, actually, because my question's around building the workforce, and probably one for Jason, I suppose. We've got the levy transfer portal that was obviously launched by the DfE on the 27th of this month. And you also at Essex County Council run your own levy transfer portal. So I'm just wondering, taking into consideration the two particular authority areas that you mentioned earlier, whether you've sort of made any sort of strides towards maybe sharing some of Essex County Council's levy with some of these companies that can support the workforce development. Jason, where you gone?
He's coming, Paula. He's coming. Don't you worry.
Yeah, don't you worry. I'm not going anywhere, mate. Not going anywhere. I think, Paula, lovely to see you, by the way. Great to see you still in the system, mate. That's really good news.
You don't mean that, so.
Well, leave that hanging then if you feel like that. But I think I think the point for us is that, yes, you're absolutely right. The levy portal transfer is there. You know, and I don't think I'll be rude when I say this, you know how slow the county council works in this particular space. And so we know they're sitting on a levy, Paula, that's just not being tapped into. I think the last 18, 19 months hasn't helped with COVID, because clearly people's priorities and certainly capacity has been put in different directions. But Simon, I think it's fair to say this is something that, particularly being galvanised and driven by this group, we've got some real vigour now to be able to go back and talk to and say, hold on a minute, we now have an Essex Skills group, independently chaired. We have the likes of yourself, Paula, and others around this table, and there's some really key actions that are coming out. How do we address this with the county council? So I think this conversation is perfect. I think, Simon, would you not agree, to give us that momentum to go back and talk to Matt, whoever else it is now within that team, the county council?
Yeah.
I mean, even if Jason and Simon, even if you can't go as far as the levy transfer, because I accept what Jason's saying, you know, it's not, I know it's painful, but you've got a whole section there in terms of Annette running the traineeship program. Use that. Yeah, you know, there are sort of there's facilities out there that can be shared with the existing provider networks that can help you.
That's a really good point.
Just to add, Paul, I think so from the levy transfer point of view, I think we started, as Jason said, pre-pandemic to have really positive discussions with the county council in particular, and to the point almost where if we could come up with the right proposal with the right employers, there was almost yes, come back to us with your plan, what you need, and we'll have those discussions. I think part of the stumbling block we got to was employers cash to pay wages, and that was almost pre-pandemic where the conversation then broke down. So on one hand, we almost had the levy, the training bit, yes, we could do that. Then finding the employers to go, yes, we're happy to pay the wages. And we find a similar thing through our Coach Core program, in that this time around again, we've incentivized and subsidized some of the wage for employers, but obviously there's only so far we can go with the money that we've got to do that. So I think that is part of the balance, and looking at ideas from this group and how we look to address that going forwards.
Well, if we fly to feet, we can obviously, if it is down to sort of companies not being able to pay the wage, then we can look at Kickstart. Again, you manage a Kickstart program. So there, and that runs until the end of December. I know it's short time, but if we can get them onto a Kickstart program, then move them on to traineeships and then on to apprenticeships, I think that would work for you. I'll shut up now.
Brilliant. No.
Thanks, Paul. And really useful, very useful.
Louise, welcome. Everybody has done their introductory dance, but don't worry, we're mid-flow, so I don't want to interrupt the meeting too much. It might just be useful for you to say hello to people though, Louise, if you like.
Hi there. Yeah, sorry I'm late, and that's a blessing that you don't have to see me do an introductory dance. I'm really jealous of Active Essex colleagues' backgrounds. Actually, they're really impressive. Need to learn how to get one of those on Zoom. But yeah, I'm Louise Aitken. I'm skills lead for the South East Local Enterprise Partnership, and we cover Essex, Southend, Thurrock, Kent Medway and East Sussex. And we have a LEP-wide skills advisory panel that's made up of key employment sectors across the patch. And so sort of really keen to engage with this group and make sure that there's a bit of a golden thread between this group and that group, because we're increasingly trying to be a voice to government on areas that we need to kind of flag up and kind of work collaboratively. So yeah, really good to be here, and sorry I'm late.
Louise, no problem at all. And again, hopefully, I was almost going to pin you on what you gave us at that last bit of the conversation. I guess for some, why would the LEP be here? Well, actually, the LEP should absolutely be a central cog in all of this. And actually, if we can line ourselves up properly and speak with a collective voice and be ambitious about what our plans are for the future, then that's ultimately what the LEP is there to hopefully positively receive that information, but also then take action with us to address some of those labour market needs, right?
Absolutely, yeah. I think the more we can all swim in the same direction, really, the better, definitely. And
we'll organise some training on Zoom backgrounds for you, Louise, as part of your action between now and next time. Catherine, are you back up again, or is that your legacy hand?
Am I what, sorry?
I can see your hand up.
Yeah, I'll get rid of that.
no problem at all. Anything else jump out from that initial piece from Simon for anybody?
Steve, just sorry.
You go, Brendan. It's fine.
Sorry, just as an observation, to what extent do you link in or value the voluntary sector contribution to the economic impact within sport? Because we talk a lot about the employed sector, and there is absolutely a huge amount that's done. But we've been doing some work with our clubs in regard to the social value that clubs are providing on a voluntary basis. And, you know, clubs with 20, 30 teams with volunteers of 30, 40, 50 volunteers within the local community are providing, you know, value into the millions in terms of the physical activity and the training development that goes on. And that's without kind of economic impact in terms of, you know, kits built, boots bought, you know, equipment bought. And the value is, to some extent, I think, really underscored or undervalued. And I just wonder how much we will be able to pull some of that out and then potentially build upon it and demonstrate the value that is actually providing on a wider society level as well.
Yeah, I'm happy to go first, and then I'm sure other people will want to come in. I think everybody on this call will get it, right? Absolutely. I guess the language that we're talking initially, because how many pieces of the elephant, right? It almost feels to me like if we can get some principles working around the professional workforce, for me, I don't think it makes any difference whether you're paid with a t-shirt or a curry or a thank you or a pat on the back than if you're paid in ultimately the good principles of human development, what's expected of me, job descriptions, role profiles, task lists. How do I do that to the best of my ability? Some training, some support, some mentoring, some resources. How do I get better at it if I want to? Not just minimum standard stuff. And ultimately, what does that reward look like? And if it's salary or pay or job title or curry in the car park, t-shirt, reward, end of season thing, actually those fundamental principles I think are exactly the same. So I think if we can get some kind of consistent approach to people development in its most general sense and talk about the economics that the LEP are probably more interested in than the social impact and others, I'm not suggesting they're not, then actually I think we can move forward absolutely with some basic principles of people development that are as applicable to volunteers as they are to the paid workforce. I guess the starting point has to be around the paid piece because A, we can do more with it probably and get hold of it better in terms of a data perspective. But yeah, I don't think it will be lost on anyone on this call. And I mean, there is stacks of, I guess, national data about it. It would be interesting if you're doing some of that work, what your measurement tools might be and who's doing that. And I'm sure Catherine's ears would have perked up because there are people at the university and there are other people already in the ecosystem, local delivery pilot wise, that are understanding that social impact piece. So yeah, I guess that's half a bit of an answer from me, but certainly not forgetting them. But ultimately, I think if we can get some way forward around the people that we've probably got more chance of influencing, controlling, doing to start with, we just extend that. But absolutely, they should be in scope because there are significantly more of them. They probably deliver significantly more value than probably their paid equivalents. And we've got some very highly skilled and motivated people applying their professional practice in voluntary environments, whether that being as treasurers or team leaders or welfare officers across that. So, Louise, maybe can I just come to you to start with, and I'm sure maybe Jason or Simon to come back in, but obviously you're not just about economic data. How would you respond to that kind of question from Brendan?
I think it's a really important point, and I think we could probably do more to harness that kind of part of the landscape. But we do actually. I mean, another part of my role is looking after European social funded projects. So I work a lot actually with third sector organisations and really kind of believe in the kind of pluses of what they bring to the table and how important they are, and actually how important they are as employers and that kind of thing. And probably they've not traditionally mobilised in the same way as other sectors have. So we've got a bit of a part of our vision is about inclusive growth, and we want that to be a real thing and not just something we're saying. And I think the third sector plays a really important part in that. So I would be keen to explore, how we can make that happen and join those links up, but also we could kind of, because we have got a lot of roots in now to the third sector. We do work with a lot of those smaller organisations through some of the funding that we oversee. If there's ways for us to bring people to the table. I think the trouble is they don't have an umbrella group. In some parts of the country they do, so it's harder to engage with them as a sort of unified sector, if that makes sense, and that's part of the problem. But I think that's not to say that we shouldn't kind of bring them into this discussion, definitely, and into sort of looking at solutions.
Thanks, Louise. Catherine?
Yeah, I just wanted to add on the volunteer front that getting our students out into communities and experiencing the real world as well, and perhaps setting up, people like myself can set up a long-term mechanism by which we can funnel volunteers into useful projects. That's something I'd be keen to look at a bit more with the group.
Simon, Jason, anything from you? I mean, this has clearly come up in the impact work around LDP, right? And it's not something lost on us, but yeah, your thoughts?
Yes, I guess if I kick off, and then Jason, if there's any other bits you want to add, please feel free. So I think particularly around this piece of work, so Jason mentioned at the start, under the foundations for success, we've used the term people development, because I think actually we're well aware that particularly in the sport and physical activity sector, volunteers are massively outweigh the paid workforce. I think with the skills piece of work, we had a long conversation as part of the East Region Skills Pilot, which is what we were part of, looking at this, debating whether we could branch out and include voluntary workforce at that point. But it was felt that the time and the capacity that we needed to put into that would have meant actually we'd still be working and we'd still be doing it. So I think from our point of view, we want to do this around volunteers, but it's a case of we had to start somewhere with the capacity that we had. And so we picked the professional workforce. As Louise highlighted, it's slightly easier. It's slightly more easier to determine who's in that and who isn't. But by all means, our plans will be for the future to do that voluntary piece. And also social value is something that's really important, and we're starting to look at and dig more into. And obviously the volunteer social value bit is massive, and the links between that. So yes, I guess the answer is yes, we're going to do that bit of work, but it was almost a case of start somewhere, get the ball rolling, and then we'll move into that space. Thanks,
Simon.
Yeah, just very quickly, I'm conscious of time. There's Brendan, you may well not have seen it, but as Simon suggested, social value and economic value certainly are some of the key terms that are now being used. And Sheffield Hallam did a report with Sport England, and you might have seen it last year, where actually what we were suggesting, and we're doing some work internally with the county council, that for every £1 spent, it was generating a £4 return. And that return goes back into across the whole health and well-being, stronger communities and the economy. So that's not just paid staff, that's anything that's happening in the space of sport. So it's kind of looked at it in a slightly different way. The way that you're talking about was the old way that we'd always say, what about the volunteers and the value they bring? And that's not disappearing, but actually the term that now is being started to look at is around measuring the social and economic impact. So Rachel's done some work in that space for us. I did a presentation to some providers, some procurement event a few weeks back now, and we were making the case about how important our agenda is and the contribution it makes to the economy. So we're not forgetting them. I just think the terminology has changed slightly. We just need to make sure that they're still captured in that, Brendan. Happy to share that offline.
Thanks, Ferg. Carl, you got your hand up, sir?
Yeah, sorry, just to kind of interject really, as a sense of, I think what we're talking about the voluntary sector, I think, to be honest, I think as these conversations continue, I think that's where we're going to be going back to the root cause. for the, we run leisure centres, and even if it's a sports centre, generally most of the employed people have to come with some kind of basic entry-level qualification to actually get into the sector, even at the lowest level, from lifeguards or fitness instructors and things like that. So unless we're targeting those with a general interest, which are the voluntary sector that are doing the football clubs or doing sports clubs and doing it voluntary, they're showing that interest. Why are they then not converting that interest that they're giving up their time for free and making a career out of it? A, because they're probably not seeing it as a viable career option, or that they just don't have the access into those entry-level points to make it from something they do on the weekend to something they can do on a day-to-day basis. So I think if we're looking to the root cause of how do we get people from into the industry, get them excited about the industry, we've almost got to start the voluntary sector, because that's where we've got to get them and educate them and skilled up to be work ready to come in. Once they're in the industry, they've already probably done those qualifications in some, and you're almost going a stage too late from our point of view. So we've even had to start it, particularly on our swimming lessons and swimming instructors, is looking at mums and dads sitting on the side of the poolside, watching the children, about trying to encourage them to come in and almost be an assistant teacher to then eventually come through and then qualifying them up. But so I think it's a really important part of this work that we're potentially talking about, is that when we come back to where do we start the journey, I think it will be almost the voluntary sector is the obvious place to start, rather than the employed sector. The employed sector is what we're hopefully trying to get everybody through education and opportunity, and it's got to start somewhere. And so therefore, if they're encouraged at an early age to get into sport or activity on a voluntary basis, they then might start to look at the educational path of how to progress through that. And also it's giving them the base level qualifications to enter into that employment. Sorry, I could rant on that for a little bit longer. But
No.
Thanks.
Rachel, come to you on this, and then we'll try and just rattle on, if that's okay.
Yeah, mine's a very quick point. It's just to say, to probably go back to Brendan and say, it really would value that conversation with you offline to come out the meeting. Our role within Active Essex is to be able to educate and bring our sports clubs with us, regardless of which NGB they may affiliate to. But social value almost feels like a futuristic term for them, demonstrating that, understanding how it can help them, how it can help their local authorities, their clubs, their facilities. It's massive. But it's almost alien. So I think, yeah, if you're doing some great work, we'd love to learn how you've gone about it and how we can harness it for the rest of the sector.
Thanks, Rach. Kieran?
It's only a brief one. I don't think anyone's got the answer for this, but as we've come out of COVID, I suppose, have we thought about things like digital transformation and how that's going to have an impact on people, and also how many jobs will be available in this sector moving forwards? Because there is a lot of technology that is starting to become readily available, such as pool cameras, exercise classes that are virtual, receptions that are swipe your card and enter now, all of them sorts of things that actually naturally decreases, one, the cost of staffing, which we all know is a high cost of staffing, but then equally would have an impact potentially on those getting people active, and then equally on the opposite end of the spectrum, less amount of jobs in the local area. So, and also what future plans that most providers have in Essex to actually combat that as well, because that can have a negative impact.
Kieran, I think you're absolutely spot on, and the whether it's the likes of a Wexa platform or the technology you're talking about there, making sport easier for people to access without needing a human interaction, but ultimately, when most of the sector is based on human interaction with the coaching or instructing role. I mean, this is a classic. When Jason and I first had the conversation with Louise maybe 2 and a bit years ago, unbeknownst to us, and I don't think that this is the kind of the knitting of the sector we need to do, Essex is one of the central government's lead partners for digital transformation in the workplace, or words to that effect, Louise, with expertise and money. There you go. And actually, it was almost just a question of what's our take on that, and how if there's some stuff going on at central government that's in Essex talking digitisation of employment, like, we need to be at that table. We weren't at the time, but that's the kind of stuff I think, again, just having this forum to come together, and like, I'm sure Louise offline will be thinking, well, actually there is a piece of work, there is some expertise, there is some stuff happening in another sector, let's apply that over here. You're nodding, I'm saying that's a good thing, hopefully, Louise.
Yeah, absolutely. So, sorry, I was just saying in the chat that, yeah, exactly right, Kieran. And that sort of thing is coming through from the other sectors we're engaging with as well. And there are starting to be more reports on things like jobs at risk of automation. So that thing of, if they're going to disappear, what does that mean? But sometimes it is about that adaptability, isn't it? So it's not that the teaching of the class is disappearing, it's the way it's taught or accessed that potentially is. And then that opens up questions about, what does local mean? Can it therefore be done kind of not just anywhere in the country, but anywhere in the world? But yeah, we could go on forever on that conversation, but it's a really interesting point. And I can, there is an economy tool we use that we could just have a look whether any jobs, particularly in the sector, are kind of being highlighted at the moment, and or ones that align to the sector. Because it's definitely, and I think it's going to become more and more prevalent in the next sort of few years, isn't it, in terms of risk.
And listen, we had, in my last 3 or 4 board meetings with Jason, the chair of Active Essex is head of global transformation at BT, right? So we've started to open some of that dialogue, because we want to be facilitating entrepreneurship through digitisation. You see the work that London Sport have done around their tech hub. So there's some conversations that Jason and Rach have been spinning in there, but almost testing some of that to help startups and help drive technology in Essex, because there's investment there to do it. But at the same time as not saying, let's then obviously replace all the jobs in the employment, but bring those two things together. So yeah, certainly a hugely important, I guess, interdependency of what we're talking about. I've kind of made an executive decision. I've informed Rach. I hope Rach has informed you, Simon. We are not going to do any breakouts. I think we've taken, I guess, perhaps a little bit longer than I'd wanted, but I think it's the discussion is important, and we're starting the journey, right? So we won't go into breakouts. I guess one of the things that would ultimately help drive this work forward is I guess the piece that Simon has asked me specifically to kind of come in and help with, is that what is it that underpins this, that is a kind of public facing thing, okay? So we've got the Active Essex strategy. So for me, is there a chapter of the book that talks about a people plan? And ultimately what Simon's presented to you already, and the conversation we start to have, is there's lots of information out there, but are there some, on the back of the kind of terms of reference, is there a kind of the wireframe of a people plan and some ambitions that ultimately we all sign up to? And I'm not suggesting that's in a kind of pledge sense, but these are the organisations, both from a kind of Essex-wide perspective, the LEP, County Council, Active Essex, the provider network. Here's some of the leading employers that have kind of come to the table that are committed to this agenda, but ultimately using this insight that we've got and using the available tools that are available to us and the ecosystem that we're operating in, whether it's around automation or resourcing or finance, here's some ambitions and here's some commitment to do some work. So one of the things I think we were going to pick up in the kind of breakout groups is like what would be useful for you to begin to kind of have broader conversations, and for us to also begin to kind of put some stuff under people's noses that says, here's the ambition and the commitment coming out of the sport and physical activity sector. Louise talked earlier on about they've got their kind of sector specialist panels, and they're interested in working with industries, bits of an environment that are keen to drive this agenda. Well, we kind of got that, and I guess where Simon and the team were asking me to go was, well, Mitch, how do we harness that into some kind of plan, some kind of strategic intent, some kind of manifesto almost, without putting too many apolitical words in there, to say, this is it, this is what we're going at. So we're now in a really good place in terms of data, a really good place in terms of the ecosystem and the system partners, a really good place in terms of leading employers and names that people recognise. Here's what we're going to next. So Simon, I guess off script, the stuff that you were going to plan on doing in those breakout rooms, is it just worth bringing a little bit of that to life now in a more group session rather than necessarily doing it in the breakouts?
Yeah, of course. So I think for me, and as Steve has just mentioned, we had there are a number of strategies and documents kicking about that are really important at the moment. So as I mentioned earlier, back in 2018, we launched the sector skills strategy, which we used as that sort of, I guess, document, as Mitch mentioned, to put under people's noses, to make aware of the direction we as a sector were trying to push, where we were trying to head to, some of the key challenges and some of the key areas that we wanted to get better at effectively. And really just wanted to take this opportunity to find out thoughts from you guys around from an employer point of view, around just highlighting some of your challenges, some of your frustrations, some of your needs around recruitment and that type of thing. And I know, Carl, you mentioned earlier, actually still potentially need another 15 to 20 individuals. Actually, what's the challenge in getting those there? And then from the likes of Paula, from Louise, from Catherine, opportunities to link in, or documents or pieces of work that are coming out that we should be aware of and that we can potentially take into account to form a direction if we create a new strategy with a bit of an action plan, and really just to get everybody's thoughts before we tried to give a bit of a brief to Steve, Sporting People, and ask them to try to pull something together on behalf of the group. Is that clear, or have I just spoke a load of waffle?
No, it's clear because you and I had discussed it briefly beforehand, but I guess the point for everybody is, does it confuse things by having another plan, another strategy? Does it help? Does it need to be a documented thing, or is it presented in a more creative digital way? Is it something that means you've got a kind of a one-pager always in your back pocket to have those conversations? Is it Carl saying, listen, let's go and help me solve this. Here's my problem, I need 25 people in the next 3 months. Who's going to help fix that? Fix it in here, and that begins to form part of the storytelling side of things. So I guess in all of your worlds and ecosystems, and whether it's a governing body side of things from Brendan, or whether it's I guess a corporate plan, Jake and a team have just written a new strategy. Like, where else? What are the tools or resources that you would like to have access to say, I'm in this, we're in this together, and this is what we're doing, and this is the plan. And as I said, pledge, manifesto, single page, 10-page, storytelling, digital. I guess that's what we wanted to try and flesh out from you, to say, I guess you're not wanting you don't want the 80-page LMI document. But what you do need is something that says, here's everybody that we're working with, and here's some basic principles upon which we're working, and to give you something useful that we can almost use as a tool that we both revisit, but also begin to measure and move forward from there. Here she comes. Thank you, Paula. Bring some sense to the group.
I'm really, really sorry. No, I'm a great believer in an action plan, quite frankly, and I think the difficulty is if we don't have specific aims and objectives that we need, and this could be bite-sized, that will be ticked off and then we move on. We're just going to keep going round and revisiting the same issues time and time again. So I'm going to chuck one in straight away, and that's, I want to see a collaborative drive towards funding of training. So as many members have said this afternoon, yeah, they do. I mean, Carl, for instance, desperately needs 20 people. But there's 20 people out there that are probably volunteers at the moment, but don't have the wherewithal to move into the next stage. And that's where I think we come in as a group. So that's my bit.
Yeah, and I think for me, Paula, that's almost one of the strategic intents, for want of a better phrase, is leverage funding and use our resources smarter and better. And for me, that would certainly be one of the things that we're aspiring to do. Catherine?
I almost unmuted Louise there by accident as we were moving around. Yeah, I just, it struck me that we've all got certain professional needs here, and they're going to be so different. You know, someone wants 25 staff, and others have got presumably targets to increase participation in sport, whatever it might be. So they're really quite diverse. So for me, that's an important starting point. What are the needs? What areas are they in? And where are any other gaps which relate to needs? And then sort of considering what are the new opportunities and what are the threats to us meeting those needs. And then I assume we're all ultimately, via skills, trying to improve participation and well-being, ultimately. So between that comes our strategy, which is us matching all of our opportunities, our professional bodies, wherever it is, or our resources to sort of match those two up. So that's what I was thinking as you were all talking. That makes sense.
Brilliant. No, absolutely. Thanks, Catherine. Louise?
Yeah, just in terms of aligning with what's already happening, we're about to produce an executive summary of our, we have a skills report we have to produce for the Department for Education, and that's very much reflecting what employers need and what the local picture looks like. So I'll be drafting that so I can make sure there's, again, a link between that. But also on the back of that, Essex County Council, I know, are currently working on a potential local skills improvement plan for Essex that sort of mirrors something DfE have also commissioned, and Kent and East Sussex in our area are working with DfE on. So I think aligning with those will be really key. And kind of more generally, we had a skills advisory panel meeting recently, and it was really striking that pretty much every employer around the table, and it's a very diverse mix of construction, engineering, logistics, hospitality, they all have recruitment challenges. So it's putting this group in the context of, you know, we know that it's kind of a lot of it's in the media at the moment, the recruitment challenges are there, but I think it's important to, I think I like the idea of a one-pager and making it really simple and stand out, because the context is that all sectors are struggling at the moment, and it was very stark. That's the first time all of the employers have fed back, and they said that usually they would have, for example, 30 applications for a job and they weren't getting any, and that's everything from admin jobs to engineering posts. So yeah, it was just that context really, but I think the more we can feed in headlines from this group into the stuff we're feeding back to government as well, the better really.
And I think to some extent what Louisa just said there is it almost feels like there's a bit of an assimilation of, so if here's the Essex County Council manifesto, here's the LEP plan that's been driven by those employers saying these things, here's the kind of provider network ambitions. Like, if you put all those out in front of you with the Active Essex data on labour market intelligence, the Sport England workforce strategy and so forth, how do you almost kind of just distill all that into something that, like, short and punchy, gets people's attention, and says, not necessarily to Brendan's equivalent, but says to Carl's equivalent and some of the operators, means something to a board member of a chairman of a club that's got 80 teams or what have you, something that they can actually, yeah, I get that, because I feel that every day or every weekend, whether it's the simple stuff around basic training and access to funding, or whether it's the more ambitious stuff about growing a business and entrepreneurship and what have you, or whether it's about the basic business side of things, is actually, I'm struggling to recruit that side of it. I can get coaches, but I'm struggling to get people that are going to do some of the more, I guess, operational office tasks in the business. So without drawing this to a perfect conclusion, I think what we will go away and do from here is almost do that kind of mapping exercise and ultimately try and come back to you guys with something that says, here is something that we approve, sign off or sign up to that feels like something that you can, with authority, commit to, I guess, from an organisation, individual within your organisations, but that actually means that we can, if it lands on the chair of the LEP, or it lands in the county council, or it lands in the providers of in Paula's membership, well, actually we could help solve some of that, like, to be able to take action from there. So I think for me, it feels, my suggestion, or what I said to Simon, is it feels like a people plan for the sector, but it feels like it's just distilling all of the things that exist into something that is a bit more ambitious and punchy and forward thinking. So we will take that offline. Happy to take comments between now and when we get our heads back together about what form that takes. And as I say, like, the sport and physical activity sector is brilliant at producing strategies and plans and documentation. So does it have to be presented in that format, or is there a smarter more digital way of having something like that is for me about the storytelling piece. Because I think if we could see Carl in 3 months' time and he's like, do you know what, Mitch, coming to that meeting, help me open that conversation over there and do that thing there that helped me solve my recruitment issue of 20, Carl's going to be a happy man. Impulse can move to the next bit. So I think it's the subtlety of what happens between them that says, yeah, it's a storytelling piece as much as it's this kind of two-page document. And I don't have the perfect answer to it, but I don't think it necessarily has to be another piece of documentation or literature that we circulate, but might be the door opener to say, and then go and have a look at the stories that we've solved by being part of this panel. So I hope that sounds okay, but that's something that we will come back to you on in due course. Is there anything else? I was a bit remiss at the beginning in terms of not asking if there was any AOB, but I guess people have quite happily contributed as we've gone through. Is there anything that people feel that we haven't picked up, or Simon, anything that I've forgotten in my rambling?
Just one bit that I wanted to speak on, and I know we briefly touched on around logo and identity. If that's okay. So again, I'll just share my screen. Let me get the right one. Just trying to find. Let me close some of my windows down. It might be easier to find then. So from the email that we sent out, and thank you to all those of you that have sent your logos over, we've gone away to our comms team and asked them to design a bit of identity, a bit of a logo, so that any of the work that we do going forward, it's got a bit of an identity and can be recognised from that point of view. So what we are planning on doing is using all the logos that everyone shared with us. We'll pull together a header footer type thing that includes everybody's logo that's represented on the skills advisory panel. But what we were keen to do is try and pull together a bit of a logo that potentially could represent the skills work and the partnership work in a wider sense. Now, we just went to the comms team, gave them a bit of a brief and said, go away, do something, send it over to us. And this is the document or some of the ideas they have come up with. Really keen just to get people's thoughts. None of these are set in stone and have to be done this way, but really it was a starter for 10 where we asked them to go away and come up with something. So I guess just before we wrap up and finish, if we're numbering number 1 as the top left and number 7 as the bottom right, does anybody have any thoughts, any preferences? Are there any bits of the logos that people are thinking, actually, that would be really good to have? Or if you merge these two bits together, yeah, what are people's thoughts?
I think the handshaking's quite strong. It's a strong part of it. The stick, jumps out at you, and about what we're about. It sort of reflects that.
Brilliant.
I like the number 3 with the map as well. So if we could incorporate the map, because that shows to me that's whole Essex.
Between the two of you, has Steve already spoken to you? Because this seems like a bit of a setup. Hey, listen, no, that is serendipity, that is. Because my suggestion was, can we use the handshake, but you, instead of having a circle, use the outline of the regional geography of the county. So almost a handshake inside the, but without using the detail of the boundaries, but just the shape. But I haven't spoken to anyone offline. There's been no secret WhatsApp chats with my two friends.
Great minds think alike.
I quite like
anyone else?
I quite like the jigsaw puzzle. I think it was what we've been talking about is about putting the pieces together to make a collaborative working and a clear pathways through. So I quite like the jigsaw puzzle bit, but yeah, listen to what everybody else has said as well. So
brilliant. Any other thoughts?
I'd echo the jigsaw piece. Probably more than the handshake. I think it's a complicated picture, but yeah, I would advocate the jigsaw piece. That's just personal preference.
Yeah,
yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you, Brendan. Any other thoughts? Oh.
No, I was just going to.
Jake loves a bit of branding. Go on.
Oh, I don't know. I quite like the handshake ones and the blue in general. I think it's quite nice.
Again, what we will do from comments and get Kieran and others to speak up in a sec, that we can take this back to the guys and we'll get another couple of ideas created off the back of this, and we'll bring those back and we can circulate them via email, etc., to sort of try and come to an agreement. Yeah, any other comments?
I was just going to say, depending on what one you go for, where it's Essex Sports Physical Activity and Skills Partnership, some of the writing seems to be quite small. So if we can make that just potentially a bit bigger, depending on what one we tend to go for. But yeah.
Yeah, brilliant.
It's not the sexiest of names for the panel. The subtlety, I guess, is it needs to tell people. People need to understand that it's Essex. Need to understand that it's collaborative. So I think there's some good useful comments there, because actually there are bits of all of that you'd probably want to weave together. Skills might just be the thing that stands out, rather than being the entire name of said panel. Anyone else got any other thoughts to chuck in at this stage?
Only that the handshake gets lost on number 1. It's so much better on number 6. That's all.
Okay, brilliant. Yeah, okay. Well, thank you for that. We will take those comments back and come with some more reworks and take it from there. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Simon. So unless there was anything else that people don't feel they've had an opportunity to raise, the last bit, I guess, is just with me in terms of when we're going to meet again. Now, we obviously lost a few people for today. For me, we need to get some momentum with this. So my suggestion is that we try and get our heads together in about 6 weeks. And that feels to me like the kind of first week in November, which is post half term, by which point I guess I would hope that Simon and I and Rach and Holly have had the conversation about what this might look like, if we can nut out the logo piece offline as well, but also not expecting this, but I hope that conversations happen from today. So you're all part of this together. If someone's got a solution for Carl, if somebody wants to help Brendan, then let's keep those conversations spinning offline. I won't suggest we get a WhatsApp group just yet, but my aspiration would be that if we're going to continue this, then it's a great way of just dropping progress and things like that in. So maybe that's for the next time we get together. But does anybody have any reservations if it's sooner or post that? Just conscious, I guess, of the half-term week being in another 4, but actually if we got together in 6 weeks' time, we're not in the middle of Christmas shenanigans, and we need to do something, I think, before Christmas, otherwise we'll lose the momentum. So does that feel okay to people if Simon pings out a doodle poll for that first week or first 2 weeks in November? Thanks, Kieran. Carl?
Yeah, it sounds fine. 6 weeks is a good time scale.
Cracking. Okay, in which case, ladies and gents, I'll give you 13 minutes back for your afternoon. Listen, really enjoyed this, and I do come back to what I said at the start. I think if we can harness the kind of network and ambition that we've heard today and build that kind of team ethos here, I'm really excited about what we can achieve together. And I think actually some of the stuff, it is as simple as just connecting some of those conversations and joining the dots, because of all the stuff that's mentioned today, there is some great stuff happening in skills and people and workforce development, but it's just not as joined up and as collaborative as it can be. So I think if we have one ambition to really just join some of those things together, and I think it was so refreshing, I think, for me to be able to have, we've had a session with Louise, with Paula and with Caroline about 2 weeks ago, I think, just to kind of get, I guess, the strategic partners in place, because they're all doing stuff in this space. Whether sport and physical activity is at the table, taking advantage, leading the way, contributing their thoughts is the bit that's missing. And for me, that's what this group can begin to do. So massive thank you for your time. I appreciate you're all busy. I hope you've enjoyed the first session and you'll come back smiling for the next one. And yeah, we'll be in touch offline with keeping this moving, and yeah, please keep the conversation going. Thank you all very much. Enjoy your Thursday afternoon.
Thanks. See you later.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.